All right.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. I appreciate. Hi, I'm Siyu from the University of Victoria, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak at COMET. I wish I could have a chance to visit there in person, maybe this summer. It's my pleasure to share this collaborative work we carried out in 2020 after the magnitude 6 Jiashi earthquake, which occurred in a very typical fold and thrust belt in the southwestern Tian Shan. I'm about to show you today is using InSAR and seismology to look at the structure controls on the earthquake rupture. Firstly, I'd like to thank the assistance and support from my two supervisors, Edwin Nissen and Rohong Zhao, and Leah for her instructions on the InSAR coseismic modeling when she was a postdoc at our group, as well as Tim Gregg, who helped me with the teleseismic body wave modeling, and Eric Bergman for his help on the collaborative earthquake relocations. Let me get started by introducing some tectonic background. Since the initial collision between the India and Eurasia at 55 million years ago, India plate has continued to converge with a stable Asia at a rate of 50 millimeters per year. Tian Shan is just at the far end of the collision zone with an estimated shortening rate of 20 millimeters per year. This intercontinental deformation is widely distributed within the mountain range by the large-scale Strexy faults and the thrust faults that bond intermountain basins as well as foreland basins. On the January 19th, a magnitude 6 earthquake occurred near the Jiashi County in the Kepingtag fold and thrust belt, which lies in the northeastern corner of the terrain basin, composing of several parallel east-west striking thrust faults. From the first estimation from USGS and the China Earthquake Center, it's a thrust slip occurred on either a low-angle plane dipping to the north or a high-angle plane dipping to the south, striking in the east-west direction. Even though it's a moderate-sized earthquake, but because of its shallow depths, it still caused intense ground shaking and damage to hundreds of buildings. Many houses get cracks in the load-bearing walls, and in the epicenter area, people describe a huge sound of explosion. Unfortunately, 2 people were injured and 1 person died as reported. Because the seismic hazard here, we think it's a good opportunity to look at this earthquake in depth. The Kepingtag thrust zone, including several faults that dip north and merge into the same detachment at depths, based on the geodetic and geological studies. This region, foreland area, accommodated a shortening rate of 4.5 millimeters per year, and this region has a large amount of seismic moment release. I'm showing here is the instrumental recorded earthquakes since 1970s. The colors are coded by the year. Seismicity in this region, however, is featured by very frequent moderate events instead of the strong events. Only 1 earthquake of magnitude 7.7 happened more than 100 years ago. If we zoom in this area, and with to have a closer look at the focal mechanism and its corresponding 3-dimensional tectonic model, we can see it easily thrust dominated. For the 1997 earthquake sequence, it involves mainly the Strexy faulting and normal faulting at the depths of 12 to 20 kilometers. But for the 2003 earthquake sequence, it mainly ruptures the northward dipping thrust faulting at depths of 5 to 7 kilometers, and the hypocenter is further south in the basin area. So we can see, although the majority of these events have thrust faulting mechanisms, some have strike slip or even normal faulting mechanisms. It seems there are different structures are controlling the tectonic deformation. a more detailed study may be needed. Thanks to the Sentinel-1, the coseismic deformation was captured by 3 tracks of satellite images with 2 ascending tracks and 1 descending track. All the 3 interferograms formed nice color fringes, which is possible to provide more precise constraints on fault geometries and depth extent. And because of there are still some discrepancies between the different source parameters from different agencies and studies, the purpose of our research is to understand which fault ruptured and how it propagated in the earthquake, and if we can infer the relationship between the fault groups and the subsurface structure, and then re-evaluate the seismic hazard of this fault and the thrust belt. To start off, let's look at what earthquake surface deformation can tell us. We use the InSAR images before and after the earthquake to measure coseismic deformation. The observed wrapped interferogram are shown in the first column. It is easily distinguished in all 3 interferograms as a double fringe ellipse pattern elongated in an east-west orientation, and each color from blue through yellow to red indicate motion away from the satellite, and 1 color cycle represents half radar wavelength, which is about 2.8 centimeters. So basically, the Kepingtag anticline exhibits up to 7.5 centimeters of line of sight displacement towards the satellite. Because the fault properties controlling the patterns of ruptures, so we apply an inverse modeling to estimate the fault parameters. A uniform inversion elastic dislocation model derived fault plane is shown as a black rectangles here. It's a very thin and long fault plane striking to west with a very shallowly deep, only 7 degrees deep angle. The total length of slip is 22 kilometers with a central depth of 7 kilometers. We are still curious about what a slip distribution looks like, and we then estimate the slip distribution by extending the uniform slip model along strike and up and down dip, and dividing the fault plane into 1 kilometer multiplied by 1 kilometer subfault patches. The red line corresponds to the fault plane that is projected on the surface. Compared with the uniform slip model, our preferred distributed slip model is longer and wider with 37 kilometers length and 9 kilometers width, but it still remains at a central depth of 7 kilometers. We use these final distributed slip results to generate the forward modeling interferograms shown on the right-hand side. We can compared with the uniform slip model, the residuals on the distributed slip model decrease significantly. And we can also notice the special slip pattern, which has a very long slip length, but very short width. We interpret that this earthquake was able to propagate easily along strike, but there is something prevented it from propagating up and down deep. But that is still our hypothesis. So we then did some structural interpretations. These 3 figures are unwrapped interferograms from 3 tracks. The line of sight and topography along the cross-section A to A prime are shown below. We interpreted this geological cross-section based on the seismic reflection profiles and the geological mapping. The cambrian evaporates at depths of 7 kilometers are likely to be the main décollement horizon. Considering the special aspect ratio of distributed slip pattern, we propose that 2 potential reasons for this pattern. One possibility is that the stratigraphic configuration as a rupture will be restricted within the competent rocks. And another possibility might be the fault geometry complexity. We support the second explanation that we think the abrupt change in the dip angle between the shallowly dipping décollement and the steep dipping ramp stop the slip propagation. And another study from He et al. In 2021 also proves our assumption that the fault plane is somewhere lying on the décollement. The aftershock sequence of this earthquake is also interesting. These are relocated aftershocks by regional and local seismic stations using 8 different structure velocity models, and all of them exhibit two distinct clusters in the general T-shaped zone. One is mainly distributed along the northern anticline with a nearly east-west extension of 40 kilometers. And the other one is just orthogonal to the first one and concentrated in the narrow zone, extending 20 kilometers northward. These aftershocks are, the colors are coded by their depths. They are mainly distributed in the range of 10 to 25 kilometers depth in the mid-crust, well below the depth of main shock resolved by the InSAR inversion. So we, considering the results from our InSAR modeling, we are guessing maybe the InSAR results reflect the aseismic afterslip along the décollement, which is above an earthquake buried in the basement, or it's just the aftershocks are separated from the main shock. So we used the teleseismic body wave waveform inversion to provide additional constraints on the source depth and mechanism of the Jiashi earthquake. Here we show the probability density function for depths that results from an inversion with all parameters free and our InSAR derived fault plane respectively. The results in the depth distribution, both a mean and a best fit solution are just under 10 kilometers or a little deeper than the 10 kilometers. We are showing here are example waveforms from 6 stations with 3 vertical wave component and 3 transverse wave components. The black traces showing in the each figure are the observed data, and the red lines show the best fitting inversion results. So basically, the waveform misfit differences between the depths of 7 kilometers and 10 kilometers are minimal. However, when the depth is increased to 15 kilometers, the synthetics are notably too broad at all 6 stations. So from these separate teleseismic body wave inversion results, we can get a conclusion that the aftershock is actually vertical separated from the main shock. Finally, we reevaluate the seismic hazard in this region. We relocated hypocenters of the 2020 January Jiashi main shock and its principal foreshock, 2 largest aftershocks, as well as the earthquake since the 1970s using the teleseismic wave and regional and local seismic phase arrival times. From this earthquake distribution pattern, we see the shallow seismicity often occurs to the north of the frontal Kepingtag anticline, as well as in the foreland area. If we do this cross-section and project the depths on this cross-section, show here, from their depth distribution, we can also get an conclusion that the seismic hazard in the Kepingtag region is not only restricted to the mountain range or the mountain front, but is also distributed in the foreland area. These are results from Sloan et al. In 2011's work in the GGI, they also pointed out that the earthquakes are distributed throughout the whole region with deeper focal depths in the further south area, more close to the Tarim Basin. And on the right-hand side, the three-dimensional model, the upper crustal earthquakes are shown as white circles, and the lower crustal earthquakes are shown as red circles. The dark green material represents relatively strong crustal material and the light green material represents relatively weak crustal material. Their inclusion is also consistent with our finding that the seismicity in the seismicity around the Kepingtag anticline is restricted to the upper crust. To sum up, here are our several mainly inclusions. The first one is a mainly line of sight displacement occurred on the back limb of the Kepingtag fault with a highest line of sight deformation of 7.5 centimeters. And the fault plane is a shallowly deeping fault plane trending east-west deep to the north, which is lying on the décollement. And this long and thin slip distribution pattern may be the result of structure complexities of the fault geometry. Next, the depth distribution discrepancies between the aftershocks and main shocks suggests that the sediments above the décollement may exhibit the velocity strengthening friction, and seismic hazard is very high across the whole region rather than being focused along the range front. That's all about my presentation today, and thanks for your time.
I'm Yingfeng Zhang from here are my collaborators, Professor Chinese Tian Shan, Wenyu Gong, Guohong Zhang, and Paul Li. They are all come from CEA. Firstly, thanks to you for her great talk. I'm going to keep on this topic in Southwest Tian Shan, specifically the Kepingtag fault and thrust belt. This picture shows the vertical sediment layers folded by the compression between Tarim Basin and the Southwest Tian Shan. Here's me. I'm going to start with motivation, followed by the spatial relations between main shock, aftershock, and afterslip. At last, I will talk about my views and feelings on the seismic hazards in Southwest Tian Shan. Firstly, why should we pay attention on Southwest Tian Shan? Look at this panel. The green colors shows the population in Central Asia, and the red circles show the number of fatalities in historical earthquakes. The larger circle represent more people died. This picture told us most people are living in foreland area in Central Asia, where large earthquakes frequently occur. The lower panel show the most foreland area are covered. Are covered by thick sediment layers, which may lend to serious lateral heterogeneity. Therefore, we have to consider the effects of sediments when we look at the seismic hazard there. That is true for Southwest Tian Shan. Millions of people are living there. For example, the Kashgar city, the second largest city in Xinjiang. Another fact is that Southwest Tian Shan is facing high earthquake risks, as shown by the recent published seismic hazard map. The most recent large earthquake recorded in Southwest Tian Shan is the 1902 earthquake, a magnitude of 7.7 earthquake. However, the structures and even surface ruptures are still largely unknown. This picture shows the Kashgar city and dusk, dense buildings and beautiful views. Here's Tian Shan and here's Tarim Basin. However, the Kashgar city is vulnerable. The buildings in Kashgar city are similar to those in Bam, which was seriously damaged by 2003 Bam earthquake. That is why we are doing earthquake research in southwest Tian Shan. In foreland area, the most dangerous earthquakes are those initiated from the down deep segment and propagated along the décollement all the way to the surface. For example, those are large earthquakes in Himalayas and Chi earthquake in Taiwan. The magnitude of earthquakes largely depends on the structures and strain accommodation in foreland area. For the foreland where active faults are mainly located in the upper sediments, we named thin-skinned foreland. For those where earthquake ruptured both basement and sediments, we named thick-skinned foreland. Properly understanding the strain accommodation is the basis to estimate the seismic hazard. We now have many observations to study earthquakes, such as GNSS, SAR, and modern seismometers. But in remote places like southwest Tian Shan, InSAR data are the most common observations. However, the limitation is that revisiting interval of SAR satellite is at least 12 days, during which rapid upslip can possibly occur and therefore bias our understanding on coseismic rupture. For example, the controversy on the depth separation between main shock and aftershock for several earthquakes in Zagros. The InSAR derived slip model is separate from the relocated aftershocks in depth. One hypothesis is that the InSAR data show the upslip signal and the slip model actually shows the upslip location rather than the main shock. Whereas other people argue that the separation between main shock and aftershocks is real. This problem has been almost solved by integration teleseismic waves and InSAR, just like what Siyu has done. But recently, the same phenomena was claimed in southwest Tian Shan. In my presentation, I focused on the moderate earthquake occurred in 2020 along the foreland area of southwest Tian Shan. This foreland thrust belt is the largest foreland active structure in southwest Tian Shan. We named it Kepingtag foreland fault and thrust belt. The previous study reported the separation between InSAR model and relocated aftershocks. We have known that from Siyu's presentation. In my presentation, I will examine the special relationship between coseismic, post-seismic slip, and aftershocks. That will help us to answer two questions. First, how does the contrasting physical properties between sediment and basement affect the strain accommodation, and how is the strain accommodated in different stages of earthquake cycles? In the next section, I will talk about depth separation between main shock and aftershock. In this section, we use the regional seismology network to relocate the aftershocks, and we use the teleseismic waveform and near field storm motion to constrain the central depth of main shock. Of course, we also use the InSAR observation to invert the slip model, but we have to keep in mind that by now we still don't know whether the slip model derived from InSAR data represent the coseismic or post-seismic slip. We firstly tried to determine the central depth of main shock by using MT5 code to invert the teleseismic waveform. As we expected, the far-field observation can hardly determine the strike of fault planes with low deep angle. We therefore force the strike to be roughly east and west as the GNSS and regional morphology suggested. The local strain was dominated by north-south compression. So firstly, we fixed the central depths, but allowed the rest parameters to vary. And then we changed the central depth from 20 to 7 kilometers. That allows us to map the central depth as a function of normalized error. In this process, we also consider different velocity structures. One is the uniform half-space model, shown as light blue and light gray beach ball. And the other is the layered model, which includes the effect of the sediments, shown as the dark blue and dark gray beach ball. However, in spite of these priori constraints, our tests show the teleseismic body wave model. The teleseismic body waves failed to constrain the exact central depth. The strong motion data are the keys to exactly determine the central depth of the main shock. The average distance between the stations, the triangles, and the epicenters is less than 30 kilometers. And the nearest one, the Shiko station, is almost right over the rupture area of the main shock. We used the finite slip model to fit the strong motion observation. The good news is that strong motion acceleration signal can be well explained by the low deep angle fault plane at shallow depths, just has been inferred by the InSAR data in previous studies. Here we show the data fitting of the Shiko station, the nearest one to the rupture area. A depth of 5 kilometers gives the best fitting, while the synthesized signal tended to become more flat as the central depth increases. The consistency between central depth. The consistency between central depths inferred by strong motion and by InSAR data proved that the InSAR signal were mainly caused by the coseismic rupture, and we further suggested that this earthquake ruptured the décollement at depths of 5 to 8 kilometers. That means we detected a moderate earthquake can initiate on the décollement. After the main shock study, we relocated the aftershock by using regional seismometers. The seismometer distributed both along the range front and in the Tarim basin. We plotted the arrival time as the function of distance. The two separating data cluster represent the two separating data cluster respectively for P and S waves suggest the sediment layers in the Tarim basin strongly affect the regional velocity structure and have to be considered in the earthquake studies. Anyway, this effect can be well delimited by using double difference relocation. Our relocated aftershock are primarily distributed beneath the coseismic rupture area, the pink bar, and extended as deep as 25 kilometers. The pattern of our relocated aftershocks is almost the same with the previous studies, including Siyu's result. No matter what velocity structure were used, now we confirmed the depth separation between main shock and aftershocks. The vertical separation between aftershocks and main shock is not uncommon. Mostly can be explained by the stress-driven mechanisms. We calculated the Coulomb stress change by using different receiver fault geometry, nose steeping and self-steeping thrust and strike slip fault. However, we found the aftershock of this event can hardly be explained by the Coulomb stress change, no matter what receiver fault geometry were used. We therefore suggest other process was involved immediately after the main shock. For example, the fluid transport. In the next section, we are going to talk about the relations between main shock and aftersleep. In the last section, we confirmed the main shock rupture the décollement and the aftershocks primarily distributed in the basement. So the next question is what was going on at the basement in the sediments? How the compressive strain is accommodated in the sediment layers. A reasonable inference is by inelastic deformation or a seismic slip, for example, afterslip. Here we use InSAR time series analysis to detect the post-seismic deformation process. We used ascending data of more than 2.5 years after main shock, while only nine months of the descending data were available when this study was going on. These colorful panels present the resultant snapshots of the post-seismic deformation process. This picture shows the cumulative post-seismic deformation for ascending and descending tracks. The InSAR signals in the fold and thrust belts are coherent and with good quality, in contrast to the noisy vertical deformation in the basins, such like that. Those vertical deformation is primarily associated to the human activity, for example, the farming and the water pumping. And therefore, in the following analysis, we ignore the subsidence in front of the mountain. This panel shows the coseismic and the post-seismic deformation transaction. In the first order, the post-seismic deformation was featured by the steeper forelimb and a gentle back limb. This pattern is quite different from the coseismic pattern. The absence of the substance to the north portion of the post-seismic indicates that the post-seismic deformation was caused by the steeper fault plane. As has been figured out on the high-resolution seismic reflection, we confidently say the afterslip primarily occurred on this branch of the décollement. Using this fault structure, we simultaneously invert the coseismic and post-seismic slip on the fault plane. We found the post-seismic slip mainly distributed on the coseismic slip mainly distributed on the horizontal décollement, whereas the post-seismic mostly distributed on the branch. To confirm this result was not the artifacts used by the caused by the trade-offs between the décollement and the split faults. We performed 2 tests. Our test result shows our model can well resolve the slip on the décollement and branch. Therefore, we can confidently say the afterslip mainly distributed on the branch in the sediment layers and relieved the strain there. The upper panel shows the Coulomb stress change on the branch fault due to the coseismic rupture. An interesting phenomenon is that the afterslip largely overlaps with the place where the strain was reduced during the coseismic period. A reasonable inference is that the fault strength decreased due to the coseismic rupture of the décollement. We use a different fraction to calculate estimate Coulomb stress change, but it doesn't change our conclusion here. The exact cause is unknown. I mean, the fault strength decrease, but fluid transport or pore pressure increase could be a possible candidate. We personally think the fluid may be gas or petroleum, as the petroleum company was performing exploration when we did field work there. And last, I will give some discussions and conclusions. Earthquakes, rupture, décollement are common. For example, the earthquakes along Himalayas, but the most typical one is Jiashi earthquake in Taiwan, which initiated from the down deep segment of the décollement and rupture all the way to the surface. This kind of most dangerous earthquake, larger magnitudes, and long surface rupture in foreland area where many people are living. However, the moderate earthquakes initiated in the décollement was reported not so frequently. The typical two earthquakes were located at the northwest Himalaya foreland, but their magnitude were quite limited, just like the 2020 Kepingtag earthquake. The first question is whether this kind of moderate earthquake initiates on the décollement can sometimes lead to large shocking earthquake like Jiashi earthquake. The second question is these moderate earthquakes just relate the rest strain left by the large earthquakes or only rupture the local velocity weakening area surrounded by large velocity strengthening area. To answer these questions, we have to carefully map out how the compressive strain is accommodated in the foreland area, particularly on the décollement. At the places with a slow strain rate, geodetic measurements like GPS and InSAR are not able to effectively capture the movement of the horizontal décollement. Instead, the repeated earthquake detection using local seismometer network may help us to solve this problem. We therefore deployed a seismometer array in Kepingtag foreland area, shown as the red and black triangles. And we hope to estimate décollement behavior by recognizing possible repeaters. We relocated the earthquakes from 2009 to 2020 and found that the earthquakes widely distributed from the sediment to as deep as 12 kilometers in the fold and the thrust belt. However, the earthquakes in the basin are primarily located in the basement. The 1997 to 2003 Jiashi earthquake sequence also shows similar pattern, that the earthquakes were dominated in the basement. The following question is, what roles the sediments are playing in the large earthquakes in Southwest Tian Shan? Another earthquake we have to pay attention is 1902 earthquake. It is the largest earthquake we ever knew in Southwest Tian Shan. The mechanism has been constrained with by using teleseismic waveforms showing a primarily thrust event, but the source fault is still largely unknown. Was it initiated from the down deep segment of the root fault and propagated along the décollement to the south, or just the root fault was ruptured and the décollement contributed less? A recent field investigation found more surface rupture shown as red solid lines. That means the décollement must be involved in the Otush earthquake. At last, I would like to give a cartoon showing different earthquakes ever recorded in Southwest Tian Shan. The first class is a large earthquake, destructive earthquakes such as the Otush earthquake. This kind of earthquake possibly both involves basement fault and a décollement or ramp in the sediment. This is the most dangerous earthquake for Southwest Tian Shan. The second class is those moderate earthquakes extending into the basement, such like the earthquake occurred in 1998 to 2003. Another new kind of earthquake was was the 2020 Kepingtag earthquake, which just ruptured part of the décollement. In this event, no basement fault was ruptured during the coseismic period of the shock. The last class is the earthquake located at the lower crust. Those earthquakes represent the reactivation of the Tarim craton. Thanks for your attention. That's all.
Thanks, Yingfeng, and thanks again to both our speakers for those great presentations. So we have a bit of time for questions now, so please pose questions in the Q&A box or the chat function. Or if there's anyone in the live audience at Leeds that has a question, let me know. And thanks to Siyu for already answering a question. She's been very efficient. Okay, so while we're waiting, I'll start with one. So Siyu, do you have anything, or could you give us an overview of what you have lined up for your work during the summer here in COMET at Leeds? You're on mute at the moment, Siyu.
So do you mean the question in the Q&A?
No, so I was just asking what you had lined up to work on over the summer here at Leeds during your visit.
Oh yeah, I'm applying for the visiting award, but the person in a Canada agency delayed my application. It didn't submit my application in the last year. It just submitted this month, so it's still in the process.
Oh, okay.
I'm now working on the InSAR time series analysis in the northern Tian Shan, also a magnitude 6 earthquake, and I wanna go to visit COMET and collaborate maybe with team or something else to help me with the InSAR analysis. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so we have one question in the Q&A. So from Market Safian. So this is to both speakers. So what's the method that you use to find depth model of the earthquake using InSAR data? So I think you may have already answered that actually. A different question.
Yeah, for finding the depths, actually we are finding the optimal strike, deep, rig, the length of distribution, as well as depths, the top of the fault plane and the bottom of the fault plane at the same time. So yeah, we are not only just for finding the depths, we are finding all the parameters at the same time. Maybe there is some trade-off between the fault strike or the fault deep and the depths, but we are trying to minimize the residual to find the best depths.
Perfect. Okay, so we have a question for Yingfeng. So thank you for your talk. Is there any further information about the rupture length and depth of the 1902 Jiashi earthquake? So how reliable is the magnitude estimated for it?
The information about thanks for your question. The information about the Altosh earthquake is quite less, and we even don't know where the epicenter is. But currently, the paper recently published reported some new surface rupture. Let's say this, yeah. This one, the solid red lines represent the new surface rupture, and the blue solid line represent the old surface rupture. But I can't make sure what they are represented. I mean maybe. I can't make sure whether this surface so-called the surface rupture was generated by the Altosh earthquake, but it looks like the length of this surface rupture are more than 50 or even 80 kilometers. So the magnitude in 1902, there are just a couple of teleseismic station. I can't make sure the magnitude is right or not, but the mechanisms is thrust looks like reasonable.
Right, thank you. Okay, I can't see any other open questions at the moment. Do we have any questions from the live audience over in Leeds?
Yeah, I have a question for Siyu. So I noticed that you do the inverse using just single interferograms. So and there's a large residues on the modeling results. So I'm wondering if that's due to the atmosphere or some other noises or even post-size deformations. So how do you evaluate the impact from the uncertainty of the InSAR modeling and how that affects your conclusions?
Yeah, thanks for your question. Yes, we actually find that there are a lot of residuals left in the uniform slip models, and why we then try to use the two fault plane slip models to do the uniform slip model that we assume there is one fault plane, the shallow deeping fault plane on the décollement, and maybe another steeper one on the ramp part. But the result seems very unreliable and seems very unreliable and not geophysical correct. So then we did a distributed slip model, and this kind of residual decreased a lot. And according, I think there is not a lot atmospheric impact in this area because it's very dry, and even in the winter, it's a January, so there is not a lot of snow. And because of the short time span, we didn't consider the atmospheric impact. Yeah, that's it.
Steve, thanks, Faye, for the question. Do we have any other questions?
Maybe I can ask a question.
Go ahead, Chi.
Thanks. It's a question directed to both speakers, I think. I've noticed you have slightly different coseismic distributions, where Siyu's coseismic distribution seems very elongated and narrow, although like they both have the same depth, I think, at a décollement level. Siyu seem to suggest it's at a hinge where the splay fault or the back limb is merging into the décollement, whereas Yingfeng's results seem to suggest it's purely in the décollement. Do you have any comments on the discrepancies here?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it's a key question for our study. But the location we can use the InSAR data can constrain the slip model or the main shock quite well, especially for the centroid depths. But the problem is the structure resolved by the high resolution seismic reflection is with a high uncertainty. If you compare my seismic reflection profile and to that in Siyu's presentation, that looks like looks like different.
You mean the model or the data profile?
I mean the data profile. The slip model, our slip model are consistent, but we use a different seismic reflection profile.
Ah. Okay.
I don't know why, but the different seismic reflection profile were published on different paper. We cited different authors' work.
Okay, interesting. Thanks for the comments. And then I think there is another question in the Q&A.
Yep, so there's one more question for you, Yingfeng. So the depth of the deepest décollement in the Tian Shan, so, and are all faults connected to this décollement in the foreland?
There's some uncertainty on the depth of the décollement, but currently we think the depth of décollement most likely at the depth of 5 to 8 or even 9 kilometers. I don't know if all the faults in the sediment connect to this to the décollement, but I think mostly.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I don't think we've got any more questions. Oh, so we've got one more question that's just come in. So for both speakers, do you have any slip rates for the faults in your study area? Any slip rate data?
I read one paper. They did some paleoseismological study in this area, and they are inferred the shortening rate is about 4.5 millimeters per year for this region, and considering its shallow dips, the fault slip rates in the deep direction maybe maybe a little bit higher.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we're coming up to 5 o'clock. I can't see any other questions, so I think we can wrap it up there. So thanks again to both our speakers and for everyone attending online and in person. So next month we have Simon Doubt from the University of Lorraine, and he's lined up for the 17th of May, and Chi will send out details of that webinar in due course. So thanks again, everyone. Thanks again to our speakers, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.